Welcome to the Coming Home Well podcast, the show that educates, supports, and advocates for the veteran community. Your host, Dr. Tyler Pieron, U.S. Army retired, will bring you exciting conversations with amazing guests about resources, research, and military history, all geared to helping our warriors to come home well. Here's your host, Dr. Tyler Pieron.
Welcome back to Coming Home Well. I'm your host, Tyler Pieron, and today we are going to be talking with somebody who's written a book, and it is an awesome book. You ought to go check it out, and it's near and dear to my heart. It's about combat, but it's also about coming home well. And so we have Fred Apgar, who's written an amazing book. He had some really cool and unique experiences during the Vietnam War. I'll call it the Vietnam War, but it was all over the place in Southeast Asia. And Fred has written the book, and it's called Return to the War on Plaine de Jar. And that's in French, and I'm probably mispronouncing it. But Fred, thank you so much for joining us on Coming Home Well.
Well, thank you, Tyler. And I appreciate this invitation and this opportunity to talk to you as well as your viewers. I appreciate it very much.
So let's talk about your experience, because you talk about it in the book. The book's really in three different parts. So we'll start at the beginning. What were you doing in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, you're correct. Basically three sections. And the first section, there's a little bit of background about my childhood and my burning desire and my goals to be a member of the military and wear the nation's uniform. And that's the first section. And I recount my year in Southeast Asia. And then the second part is following the war, and I refer to it as the Second Indochina War. Mm-hmm. From afar, I still had, when I left Southeast Asia, I still had 2 years left in the Air Force. So I followed the war to its conclusion and post-war. And then the third part was really a journey of self-discovery. I found myself gradually in the years following my service in Southeast Asia and my service in the Air Force. I just found certain events in my life that triggered thoughts and feelings. And I guess maybe I'm a little slow, but I eventually came to the conclusion I was being led on a journey. And and it was God who whispered in my ear on a number of occasions. But it's amazing as I look back, the events that led to my decision to return to Southeast Asia in search of what I had left behind. And my story is not unique in as much as anyone who's served in combat, wherever that theater happens to be, everyone, to a certain extent, gets wounded and leaves a part of themselves behind, because war is just it's a horrible situation that men and women find themselves in. So that the third part was the awakening and the journey back to Southeast Asia. And really, without planning certain events, what I experienced in Southeast Asia was just remarkable. And I received some great gifts from complete and total strangers whom I had never met. So
let's back it up. You're growing up, you always wanted to serve in the military. You finally do. You join the Air Force. And then they send you to where? Yes, 1969. Paint that scene for us.
Okay. I realized my childhood dream, joined the Air Force, and it was my desire to serve in a combat role. And as crazy as this sounds, and I know that there were others with whom I had spoken with, but we were sort of worried the war would be over before we had our opportunity to be there and to
Mm-hmm.
serve. But I volunteered. I went to Armed Forces Air Intelligence School in Colorado. And towards the end of the training, couple months, I guess, to go before the end of the training, you get your dream sheet. Where do you want to serve and what capacity, what command, and so on and so forth. And there was no question. I wanted to go to Southeast Asia and, if possible, as an intelligence officer, some combat role. And I got the best assignment out of the school. I was assigned to 7th Airborne Command and Control Squadron, 7 ACCS, stationed at Udorn, Thailand. It's a base north, about, maybe 30 miles from the Mekong River, and Vientiane Laos is right on the other side. It's an airborne command and control squadron,
Mm-hmm.
and it had to be airborne in those days because our radios were line of sight. I mean, it's as
Yeah.
simple as that. We were controlling aircraft flying into Laos. And let me say at the outset, while I may be a Vietnam veteran, other than a couple of short trips to Vietnam, my experience was Laos and northern Laos.
Right. And
Which,
that was one of the things I found so fascinating because, at the time, this was all unacknowledged. Yeah,
right.
we had some things in Thailand, but that was just, a base. That wasn't the
Yeah.
war. And I call it the Vietnam War because that's what everybody refers to
Yes.
it. But you were in Laos and doing some really cool things, supporting, the gunships and airstrikes and search and rescue.
Yeah.
uh, you know, th- the things that we have AWACS now and all these other satellite communications, they
That's right.
didn't have that. They needed somebody to receive and coordinate all those things up in the air,
Yeah.
which is such a big change from how we do things now.
Both North and South Laos have mountains.
Hmm.
And that was the problem with communication. So we had to, the command portion had to be above the mountains. And of course, communicating with aircraft was not a problem, but the real challenge was, and our role, one of our major roles was supporting the so-called secret army, the so-called CIA's secret army,
Hmm.
uh, Les Armées Clandestines. It's a little French. That's about
Yeah.
all I can say. But it was the secret army.
And that was
And
the Hmongs. I'm not sure how
that
to say
those
it.
were the ethnic Hmongs.
Hmm.
And that part of the Vietnam War, or the Second Indochina War, is not widely known, not widely talked about, although there are some books about what was taking place in northern Laos. And the war in northern Laos was different than the war in southern Laos. Southern Laos was the Ho Chi Minh Trail and interdicting the trucks and the troops that were moving from the north into the south. Whereas in the north, it was the army on the ground of the Hmong.
Hmm.
The Hmong are ethnic Chinese that migrated to Laos maybe 1,000 years ago. And they're mountain people, kind
Hmm.
of short of stature, very strong, and a lot of stamina. And I guess part of that is farming on those hillsides.
Yeah.
They,
You'd have to
they were
be.
led by General Vang Pao, who was the unquestioned leader of the Hmong. Um, as a teenager, the French, because prior to World War II, actually starting in the 1860s, it was French Indochina, and the
Hmm.
French had colonies of Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos. At any rate, during World War II, this teenager, General who became General Vang Pao, was a translator for the French. Following the war, he was just a remarkable person. And they saw the leadership qualities in him. So he went to he became a policeman, and then from there into the army. And the CIA, in the post First Indochina War, the French were defeated at Dien Bien Phu. The CIA began to, and actually the CIA was involved with the French before Dien Bien Phu. But they recruited General Vang Pao, and he accepted. And in turn, he was that ethnic leader and cultural leader for the Hmong. And they flocked and they followed him and started out with about 9,000 men in the army. Eventually, at its peak, there may have been about 40,000 Hmong soldiers.
That's a fair bit.
It was. But the war and the years took its toll on those numbers. And by the end of the existence of the army in 1975, there were probably 20,000 or thereabouts. So the attrition and sort of like the South in the Civil War, they were getting younger and younger recruits to replace those that were lost. The Hmong were courageous people, a giving, caring people, and I couldn't help but just develop an affinity to them and their cause.
Very heroic and very, fighting for their country and their people.
Yes.
And doing it just exceptionally in difficult conditions.
Yes. Very, very difficult. So our role, or my role as an intelligence officer on that airborne command post, in the command post, we had the director. He was a light colonel or a colonel, and then he had an assistant that was the battle staff operations officer, and that was a captain or major. A couple of controllers who controlled the aircraft, and our responsibility, aircraft that came into northern Laos, they checked in with us. So we were the controlling authority. In southern Laos, there was a similar platform in a C-130, and they controlled the aircraft that came in, that entered airspace in southern Laos. And then the intelligence officer, so we were responsible for breaking out the targets from the fragmentary orders. It was called the FRAG, just a list of all the aircraft that were scheduled to fly into our area that night, the type of aircraft, the weapons load, and so forth. And then the other main responsibility was maintain contact with the ground. Embedded in the units of the Hmong were what were called forward air guides, FAGs. And
I bet they love that acronym.
I know. And they were CIA trained, paramilitary trained them. And so they had to speak English to speak with the controlling aircraft. But they were ethnic Thais, some Laotians, some Americans that were on the ground with these special guerrilla units. So we spoke with them, and there were a couple that I developed a very close relationship. One, his call sign was Hilltop. The other, his call sign was Counter. So we communicated.
Did you meet them in person or just over the radio?
Well, Hilltop was probably the closest relationship that I had, and I met him several times. I was hospitalized with dengue fever. He came down. That was the first time I met him. He came down to Udorn. He was actually from Udorn, just outside. And I sort of opened my eyes, and here was this guy, and here was Hilltop. So, and then I saw him a couple other times when he came to Udorn, little, weekend leave and so forth. And then on my every month, our squadron would have a little Sawadee party saying goodbye to those members of the squadron that were leaving at the end of the
Like a
month.
hail and farewell type thing.
Exactly. You put on your party suits, you go down to restaurants, there's a lot of adult beverages, and you know, and having served,
We don't do fun things like that anymore. No
no.
alcohol. General order number one. But
Well,
allegedly it happens anyway.
this
I
was,
wouldn't know about that.
I'm sure this was, at a restaurant in town. And let me digress. You experience this. Anyone in the military, and particularly when you're in a combat situation, the relationship that you develop with your comrades is very special, very strong, very emotional, and that unity and what you feel for one another is just great, and it's something that lasts a lifetime. And there are guys that I still maintain contact with. At
Oh
any
yeah.
rate, at
You
this
forge
Saudi
those
party,
bonds so deeply and quickly
yes,
because it's very
yeah,
dangerous and it's a forge. It's not a slow burn or
yeah,
where you're sort of knowing someone casually. It's a little bit different, isn't it?
it is, and made all that much stronger by the acts of courage and heroism, and without thinking, just reacting in order to save the lives of their comrades.
Hmm.
It was a privilege. It was a wonderful learning experience, but I digress. At that going away party, we were having a good time, and in walks Hilltop, and he was a kind of a celebrity. His reputation was known. He was the senior fag of all of the uh, those controllers in the Army. Um, in 1975, at the end of May 10th through the 14th, when we evacuated about 4,000 of the leaders, General Vang Pao, his staff, senior officers, brought them to the United States. Hilltop was among those. So that's an indication of how important he was. But he attended the Saudi party. And I was just blown away. He gave me a watch made in Russia that he had taken off the tank commander
Hmm.
of a tank that his team had captured and destroyed in northern Laos on the PDJ. And I'll come back to that. But yeah, I did have an opportunity to
Well, that's
meet.
pretty cool.
Yeah,
Especially so, a lot of times you develop these relationships with folks, especially when you're at a distance on the radio, you're talking to them on a regular basis, but you don't always get a chance to meet them. It's kind of like people by email nowadays.
yeah,
That other end, hey, they've always been super helpful uh, but at the same time, I couldn't pick them out of a lineup.
yeah,
So the fact that you're able to meet them and get to know them in a personal level is pretty darn amazing.
yeah. So
So you were in Vietnam or Laos and northern Thailand for about a year, doing some amazing things and things that weren't really public. And one of the things I really took away from the book, and we've seen this in other venues in Iraq and Afghanistan, is the rules of engagement were
mm,
incredibly frustrating. I was in Iraq at the beginning part of the war, and the rules were don't die and make them die. I mean, I'm simplifying it,
yeah,
but very loose, very, hey, this is a war. Versus later, especially in Afghanistan, it was, hey, we're going to dangle you on a hook. And if they shoot at you, you've got to warn them 20 times
yeah.
before you can shoot back. I'm grossly exaggerating, but that moral injury of being bait and or being shot at and not being able to respond effectively was something that I picked up from your book.
You're absolutely right. Very, very frustrating. And the example you sort of made up is not that far off. For example, SAMs, and surface-to-air missile, the SA-2 guideline made in Russia and China that they supplied to the North Vietnamese. Very deadly, very accurate for airplanes at altitude.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we could not attack targets 20 miles from the Chinese border. There were railroad yards in Hanoi, north of Hanoi, that we could not strike. And yet on photographs, there are railroad cars lined up with probably hundreds of SAM missiles sitting on those railroad cars that we could not attack. We could only attack, our pilots, our Air Force and Navy and Marine pilots could only attack SAM sites, not while they were being built, only when they went active and they were actively illuminating an aircraft with their radar.
So I mean, a good analogy for my ground pounding friends is, yes, they've got the rifle, it's sitting next to them, but until they pick it up and point it at you and from safe to semi, then you can do something.
Yeah,
As opposed to, yeah, I'm gonna kill you. I've got this rifle. Oh, I can't do anything.
exactly.
How incredibly frustrating. And I know this is a experience a lot of people have felt in the
Yes.
last 50 years, both
Oh,
from the Vietnam War forward. But how crazy is that?
yeah, yeah. Uh, Very frustrating. And I can't say there were deliberate acts of violating the ROE, but it did happen from time to time. There was a little village called Kang Kai, and in the village there was a Chinese cultural center. And that was, of course, off limits because we don't want to offend the Chinese. And there was a no bomb line around it. I can't remember, 5 miles or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And and we and this happens today. And then intelligence was developed about a radio station that the North Vietnamese were using that was about a mile or two from this Chinese cultural center. Well, we did get permission to bomb the radio station. Bombs went errant. The culture, I'm sorry to laugh, the cultural center was bombed, and there were multiple secondary explosions that went off.
I'm shocked.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
And for
Um,
those who are listening and don't know what that means, it means they had other explosives in that building.
exactly. Yeah. And so it was very frustrating, but we that's what we had to live with.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably, and getting ahead of myself, but that was probably one of the, um, I don't know, parts of that whole experience, that second Indochina War, that was flawed. And we allowed that to happen. And
Yeah,
it's,
the concept of, okay, I'm fighting, boom, I get that. Most people get that.
yeah,
But when you start handicapping yourself
yeah,
and recognizing that you're in danger and your fellow air crew members are in danger because, hey, we're making up some fake rules to
yeah,
avoid offending somebody and giving them safe harbor, when you can see they're sitting on a train, boom, go bomb them. Not going to be a problem anymore.
yeah.
That must have been incredibly frustrating. So you're seeing this, the cultural center gets hit, and what happens next?
Well, no one was punished, or as far as I know, for that. And
Accidents happen.
I wish I could remember. It was laser guided munitions, and the excuse was that a cloud layer came in and diffused the laser, something like that. Yeah. It's I think it's in the book, the exact words about that.
Hmm. Oh, that's amazing. So, I mean, people are taking care of business, but you're seeing this firsthand, these artificial rules of engagement that are just incredibly frustrating, that are putting people's lives at risk. And
Yes.
then you serve your term. You're in Thailand and Laos for what, a year?
A year, 1 year to the day. Yes.
Ah,
Yeah.
so it's amazing to me because nowadays they'll extend people 16 months to go to Iraq and things like that.
Yeah.
But back then it was as soon as you got your year you could leave. So it was a constant rotation of people, individuals, not units.
Yes. And that presented, there's always a learning curve in whatever, you
Hmm.
pursue. And what happened, you had different people leaving at different times. So there was always those newbies that, you had to be trained, and it's
Hmm.
perfectly understandable. It wasn't rocket science, but there were a lot of balls that we had to, keep in the air at the same time.
Hmm. It sounds like a
And
lot of coordination and getting to know the people and who's
yes,
doing what when and
and
call
routines.
signs and
Yep.
understanding it intuitively in
Yep.
real time as opposed to theoretical in the schoolhouse would take a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And and sort of that learning curve. I really, I was totally unprepared for that experience, both in terms of the specifics of the job, the call signs, the frequencies, the munitions, and uh, learning. It wasn't that long. What was it? The Mercator, I guess, system that,
MGRS,
yeah, that we used,
the
and
military
Zulu
grid
time,
reference.
and yeah,
Yeah.
I mean there was just a lot. But then there was the emotional part. It was the first time in my life, and I was what, 22, I guess, when I went over, that I ever thought about dying, the thought occurred that, hey, there's a chance, you're getting into an airplane, you're flying over hostile territory, there are AAA guns, there are SAM sites, and oh yeah, part of your job is to be sure you avoid those areas. Oh, great.
Yeah.
But death was always around. It was
Hmm.
part of the job. There were and again, my situation was a lot different from the ground pounders who were on the ground for 60 days at a time, eating MREs, or not even MREs, K rations, and so forth, and having water dropped, to their sites.
Hmm.
Um, but um, I forgot where I was headed with that.
Well, it's
But
a challenging environment in that, if you're on the ground, and I was an army guy, you can
mm,
shoot back.
yeah,
But if you're up in the air directing, essentially what we use in an AWACS type of thing nowadays, circling up in the air, and you know that there's people that want to come shoot you, or rockets and SAMs and all the other things that could hit you, and you can't shoot back. I mean, that's just you can have other
yeah,
things coordinate, but it's a very difficult position for a young person in their early 20s who are almost always think they're invincible to
yeah,
realize, oh my gosh, this is really dangerous. I
yes,
remember the
yeah,
first time
and
that a mortar dropped in and I was like really close and I'm like, oh, after a while you get numb to it, but
yeah,
initially I was like, dang, that's a pretty interesting experience.
yeah. It was interesting, and I'm sure you saw this, Tyler, how different people responded. Um, some, their religion was their strength.
Hmm.
Others, it was the haze of alcohol and drugs. We all found different ways to cope with uh, those feelings and emotions that we all feel, that's common and very normal. Um, and for me, I just dove into the work, and I just became not obsessed, that's not the right word. I guess maybe obsessed a little bit, but
Compulsive, something, I
compulsive.
don't know.
Yeah,
I'm trying to come up with
just
some words.
reading all I could, reading,
Mhm.
after action reports and the weekly intelligence summaries, um, and I was always the first to get to the shack and one of the last to leave. So I kind of threw myself into that, and at the time, I can't say that I loved it, but I did. I know that I wanted to do the best that I could, um, and that's one thing that I like when I see other people working and pursuing their hobbies. I love passion and intensity and people that just throw themselves into a job, and that's I love to see
One of the
that.
things I always hear people talk about in their military time is like, I wouldn't change a thing, but I wouldn't do it again. And
Mm.
that resonates with me. Like, yes, while I was there, that's what we were doing. And, all these memories and all these things and the camaraderie and the mission and the shared purpose and all these things. But golly, looking back
Yeah,
at it, what was I thinking?
yeah,
So
yeah.
you served your time and then you're got a couple more years left in the Air Force and you're coming home, and that wasn't exactly the best situation, was it?
It wasn't. And my return to Laos in 2014 was really, and I see this now in looking
Hmm.
back, is related to that reception that a lot of Vietnam veterans received. The nation was in turmoil. It was an unpopular war at home, um, probably by a minority of Americans felt that way. But yet, the returning Vietnam veteran was for some reason identified as the evil person here
Hmm.
because their government chose to pursue that. And we were told not to wear our uniforms when flying, to our next base and so forth. Just avoid that
Hmm.
because it didn't really happen to me other than when I left Travis Air Force Base in a bus. There were demonstrators and hollering, vile things, and just the looks on their faces, the anger and the hatred. You could just feel it.
Hmm.
Um, at any
And
rate,
you survive this whole year of war, and then you come back, and your country is saying, "Go to hell."
yeah,
That's got to be jarring. It's got to be very challenging.
it was. And what I did, I repressed it.
Hmm.
I took it inside. I was very fortunate. I did, well, I had 2 years left in the Air Force when I got back. So I was still in the military community. But even after that, it was 1972, and the college campuses were, just full of that hatred.
Hmm.
Um, so I repressed it. And it took maybe 20, 30 years for me to realize I was missing something in my life.
Hmm.
And that's in my return, I got that back. And that really was my identity, that I I couldn't celebrate, or I shouldn't say I couldn't, I didn't. And that was my own
You packed
feelings
it
that,
up,
yeah,
compartmentalized it, and put it
exactly.
away.
And
So
get on with my life. Yeah.
let's talk about you get back, you've got a couple more years, you finish with the Air Force. What happened in the interim between 1972 and 2014 when you decided to go back to Laos and explore that? And we'll talk about that trip in a moment, but sort of that interim time, what was going on with you? What'd you do? Where were you at?
Well, I had a lot of distractions in as much as I had a lot of living to do.
Mm-hmm.
I immediately, when I got out of the Air Force, did graduate work at Syracuse University, which the campus was kind of a hostile place. And I was reminded, you know, don't mention anything, don't wear anything, and so forth. But
Mm-hmm.
at any rate, and then I started my career in education on Long Island. And I was 36 years in education. Um, I was an athletic director for a couple of school districts on Long Island and loved it. And it was in the 1989 is when my awakening started very slowly. And that's when I visited the wall,
Mm-hmm.
the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. Just a very moving, very powerful experience. And I've been back about 4 or 5 times, and each time it's just remarkable. But that got me thinking of that service and where I am in life, and gradually things started to bubble up into my conscious behavior. Um, and while I was still working on Long Island as an educator, um, the town of Huntington in which I lived, they had and still have a Veterans Plaza, and there are monuments for World War II, Korea. It's got all the names and so forth, and so they started something for Vietnam veterans. So
Mm-hmm.
there was an unveiling, a wonderful ceremony, and that for the first time, the speaker was General Labute, Frank Labute, who was a Marine Corps general and working in DHS at the time. And that was the first time I heard "Welcome Home."
Mm.
That was a very powerful 2 words. It's very
Like
simple.
30 years later.
Yeah, that still,
Wow.
I think, is special for the Vietnam vet. I don't know about, veterans of your era, if that means as much as what it does to the Vietnam vet. But
I think,
um,
I've had that opposite experience. I think because of how poorly the Vietnam veterans were treated, that the opposite was true. I mean, I remember getting stopping in Gander on a trip back to the States, and there were all sorts of people there to meet us at like 2 in the morning, just,
yeah,
welcome home. I'm like, who are these people in the middle of nowhere?
yeah,
And then, like just great, they had candy bars and stuff because it was a
yeah,
stopover. It wasn't even the final destination. And because of how poorly everybody was treated, I think the country learned from that. Even
I
if
think,
you are opposed to the war,
yeah,
our veterans are respected and treated well, even if the person is totally against the war, whatever war it is.
yeah.
I think,
Yes,
collectively shame the people that were doing that and
yeah,
recognize that, hey, the only difference is they got drafted. It wasn't even like, a lot of them were drafted into some volunteers, but treating our own countrymen as the bad guys
yeah,
when it wasn't something they chose.
yeah.
I think we've learned from that, and that's quite an
I
amazing
agree.
thing. And I think it really started with the Persian Gulf War. Very much the
Yeah,
overwhelming support for the individuals and the military as a whole versus and so that's one of the greatest things I think is out of that horrible situation is we
yeah.
people have now recognized how crappy that was.
I agree, Tyler. Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah, because I hear that all the time. I've talked to a lot of Vietnam era veterans and just how crappy they were treated and had to hide the fact that they served,
yeah,
to be, either not castigated or thought poorly of or whatever. And then boom, now these same folks, because we're talking 30 years ago for Desert Storm, if I do my math, almost 40. Uh, and those are the folks that were back for 20 years, so they were in their 40s, or
Yeah.
maybe 50s at the time. They're the ones that were welcoming all the Desert Storms. So we righted
Yeah.
that wrong because of how poorly all of our Vietnam veterans were treated. So uh, that's some good that came out of it, I think.
Yeah. I agree 100%. Yeah.
So you went in 1982, I think, was when the Vietnam Wall memorial was consecrated in D.C. You
Yeah.
went in 89. We've got the Persian Gulf in 91, 92. And then this was bubbling.
Yeah.
You've been out for a while. It's been sort of bubbling and it hits you. You're listening
Yes.
to the general. He said, "Welcome home," and must have felt like a gut punch.
It was, yeah, all of a sudden that started me thinking a little pride in what you had accomplished, which was something I hadn't allowed myself to do. A couple of years later, after visiting the wall, I started writing a journal about my family going back generations and my life as growing up in the 50s in a small town, USA.
Hmm.
And interestingly, as I'm writing the book, I started with chapter 9, which was my military years. And as I'm writing the book, I get contacted by a guy who was in our squadron, and he's writing a book about 7th Airborne Command and Control Squadron. And he asked me to make some contributions to the book and pictures and so forth, which I did. And he had obtained mission reports from our squadron. Some of those reports I had written.
Yeah.
So I now had this document so I could go back and I knew what was happening on a particular day, June 2nd in
Hmm.
1969 and so forth. So that spurred me on.
Yeah.
Um, I retire in 2007 and I moved to the state of Washington. And for the first time, I was an at-large member of the VFW, but I could now had the time to be active in a post. And the first July 4th parade, it was this wonderful town, Edmonds, Washington, that really loves their veterans and the military, and they do
So where
wonderful.
is Edmonds? I was at Fort Lewis. So, uh,
Okay, it's north of Seattle.
okay.
Yeah, about 20
Yeah.
miles north of Seattle.
So
So
not
you
too
were,
far from the Canadian border.
yeah.
Yeah.
So 4th of July, it's my first parade, and the VFW was right at the head, and people said, this is going to be very positive. And for the first time, now in 1889, I heard first welcome home for the first time, and then for the first time, I get emotional now. People stood up and said, "Thank you for your service." I had never heard that before. So
Hmm.
all these things are now, what's going on in my life, and then I had an opportunity and that post to meet these World War II veterans, these Korean War veterans, and become friends with them and get them to open up about their experiences.
Hmm.
And I was being led on a journey, and you know what, I've got to go back there and see what I left behind. And
And by there you mean Laos.
Laos, yes.
Laos, yeah.
I did.
Eh,
I did stop in Hanoi. I was there 2 days, um, and that was incredible. It was just an incredible journey. Um,
How long
and
did you go?
it was about 12, 13 days.
So a good
Uh,
amount of time, not
yeah,
just a couple days, look around and go.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
It was wonderful.
So how did you
Interesting.
arrange that trip? I mean, was it you? Was it a group of folks?
No, I went by myself, but
Hmm.
I had a company, Oddly Travel. They're wonderful people. In fact, I've got another trip coming up in November with those folks. But basically, I told them, this is what I wanted, this is where I want to go. They made all the arrangements.
Oh,
All I had
wonderful.
All I had to do was fly into Hanoi, get my own airfare over and then
Hmm.
back. And they had everything. I had a guide or a translator, guide, and a driver.
Mm.
And so I told them all the little Lima sites I wanted to go to and the river I wanted to float down, the roads I wanted to travel, and so
Oh,
forth.
wow.
What made the trip amazing, it was just maybe 3 weeks. I was attending a new church and it was a guest pastor. And this is very important. And it was the third of a three-part series of sermons on forgiveness. And he read some scripture. And towards the end of his sermon, he quoted Philippians 3, verse 13. I'm focusing all my energies on this one thing, forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead. Tyler, in that instance, the the animosity that I had felt for all those anti-war people, the John Kerrys of the world and the Jane Fondas, in that instant that was lifted. It was it was wonderful. It was a wonderful feeling. I, I forgot about that. That wasn't
Hmm.
important. In my travels to Southeast Asia, I met some amazing people. I met some victims of the war who were truly victims. And I don't know how we're doing on time here, but
We've got
um,
time.
okay. Um,
I'm fascinated. I'm picturing myself, I've been to Iraq, I've been to Afghanistan. I love the region,
yeah,
but I couldn't imagine going back right now.
yeah.
Maybe in 30 years, that
Well,
maybe if, things change on the ground and, I'm
yeah.
picturing the same sort of situation 40 years in the future of, I don't carry
Well,
the animosity, but at the same time, I also couldn't imagine going and, it's a very dangerous place still, both of them.
yeah. The Lao are just wonderful people, gentle, kind, open their homes. Every person we met were just wonderful. But one of the sites I wanted to visit was Tampu Caves. It's a big cave complex.
Hmm.
And in 1968, 2 years before I went there, the cave was attacked, and I can't say it was destroyed, but anyway, a rocket went in, exploded, and killed close to 400 people. So I wanted to see the cave. We went up, my guide, myself, and walked around, very humbling experience, and came down. And there were a couple little huts that were selling refreshments and so forth. And her name was Nang Bua, Boua. And she was at the base of the cave, and her story as a 12-year-old girl, she had gone up with her mother, grandmother, and five siblings, went up to the cave because of the airstrikes.
Hmm.
And this one morning in 1968, she left the cave with an aunt. She was going to visit another relative. They got to the bottom of the hill. The airplanes came. They laid down in a trench and so forth. And that's the day when the cave was struck.
Oh, wow.
In that destruction, her mother, grandmother, five siblings were all killed. So now I'm meeting Nang Bua, and she's telling me her story. And whenever I spoke with the Lao, I asked, I said, well, how do you feel about the United States that we came here and caused so much damage and destruction? And now she lost what, six members of her immediate
Like
family.
most of her family.
Yes, and she looked up at the cave and said, well, I'm sad when I look up there and I'm reminded of what I lost, but I don't think about that anymore. I just think about the future and where I'm going.
Hmm.
Now,
What a mirror to your scripture.
exactly. She's Buddhist, and she almost quotes verbatim a scripture from the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Kankai, and I told you about how we destroyed the, in just before I left, there was a big battle on Kankai, and everything was going, and the city was destroyed. In that battle, there were two young boys. Well, let me go back. So I'm visiting Kankai, and what we did, we looked for the oldest man in town and say, hey, who in town, was here during the war and might have a story to tell? He directed us to this street, and there were two men and their wives sitting around a little fire. It was kind of chilly outside, and so we sat down. And again, they sit down. I get a stool. They're sitting on the ground. I get refreshments and so forth, and we start telling the story, and they wanted to know. They were interested in what I did and so forth. So here were two young boys. They were 12 years old, and this is during that Battle of Konkai. They were on their way to school. Airplanes come, so they run into the woods, the jungle, and hide. And they were both injured during the blast, seriously injured. And one talks to the other, and he bends down and lifts up his trouser, and he's got a prosthetic leg. He talks to his friend, and his friend does the same thing. He's got a prosthetic. They both lost legs in that bombing raid. And I was 30,000 feet above.
And they were just young kids.
They were kids.
Yeah, it's not like they were fighters or, that kind of
innocent kids. And so I asked them just what I had asked Nanbu. I said, well, how do you feel? United States, we did that to you, and you were here to help us, and we'll always be grateful to the United States. And we don't think about that anymore. We don't, and that was, for me, it was forgiveness. And they also almost quoted that scripture. No, we love our grandkids, and that's what we, are concerned
Isn't that amazing?
So the forgiveness, there was forgiveness that I received on behalf of these Laotian people.
And that's not what you expected, was it?
Not at all. Not at all. I was totally expecting
embittered or angry or, holding the grudge.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what I expected. I was in shock and very pleased with what I heard.
Mm-hmm.
And I met a couple of other people who were forced to live in caves. One young man was born in that very same cave, Tampu.
Oh, wow.
After the destruction. Born when I was over there, still active. So there were these little connections. And then I met 4 soldiers. When I was in Hanoi, we were out on the Paul Doomer Bridge. It's the bridge over the Red River, and we would relentlessly try to attack that with very little damage to the bridge. But I wanted to experience the bridge. And as we're coming back, walking in the streets of Hanoi back to the hotel, I see a man up ahead, and he's in a uniform, this nice light brown uniform, and a chest full of medals and so forth. So we introduce each other, and he had been a senior lieutenant in the North Vietnamese army. He had fought in Laos, spent most of his time in South Vietnam, but was in Laos. And he asked about me, and I told him I was, in the Air Force, and his eyes lit up. We embraced, we hugged, we held hands. The response was just amazing. It was as if we were long lost friends. We hadn't seen each other, and there was no animosity, and it was brotherhood is what it was. And he told the story, and his story is in the book,
Yep.
and that was part of the brotherhood that I found. Later in my travels in Laos, I met this crippled guy, bent over. His name was Somdi, and he
Mhm.
fought for the Pathet Lao. And
And for,
again,
what is the Pathet Lao for the folks who haven't read the book yet?
okay, the Pathet Lao, that would be the equivalent of Laotians to the Viet Cong in Vietnam.
Hmm.
They were the communist cadre that were fighting for independence.
Hmm.
Uh, and they actually, the Pathet Lao started in the 40s against France, but then they came under communist rule, uh,
Right.
communist influence. So they were the communists. But again, it was one of friendship and hand holding, and he kissed me goodbye when we left. And then I had the good fortune, I met two elderly men that had fought for General Vang Pao. They
Mm.
were in the secret army. I couldn't have planned it. I didn't plan it, but I couldn't have planned it any better. I had hoped to meet these people. And
Hmm.
again, it was that brotherhood and they both knew our call sign. Our call
Oh,
sign was
wow.
like it. They both knew it because they're on the ground and we're sending them flare ships and gunships and
Hmm.
slow movers because they were in troops in contact with the enemy. And so
That's who you
well, how they
called.
can, they, saved our lives. But it was just wonderful experience.
So you had all these time, you go there. How did that change you? So you obviously wrote the book after you started drafting it before you went.
Mhm. That's right.
Uh, and then you said, hey, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to document, which I love the fact that you documented this because these stories that are, so important get lost. I
Yeah.
have a friend whose son is a Civil War historian, and
Okay.
he's down at one of the big schools in Texas. I don't want to out him, but his main thing that he uses for his research are all the letters to and
Yeah.
from,
Yes.
which is we don't have those anymore because everything's email and transitory.
Yeah.
So it's more of you'd think that we'd have way more things to look at to capture the individual stories, but I think it's less because it's more of it's not a physical thing anymore.
Yeah.
We capture a million pictures on our phone and we don't print them.
Yeah.
Uh, but
Yeah.
you have those, and you have some pictures, some really interesting pictures in your book that tell a story as well. And so
Yeah.
you wrote the book. Who were you writing the book for?
Um, Probably myself.
I got that.
Um, yeah. Probably myself.
But it's
I
really not for you. It
no.
helped you, but it's for
Yes.
everybody else. It's a great book.
Well,
You
thank you.
get you feel the emotions, you feel the fear, you feel the frustrations, and then you feel the warmth and acceptance as
Yeah.
you're reading it. And that's, I think, hard to do to convey
Yeah.
in a written format, and you do it really well.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for your kind comments. I mention, and in some of the publicity, this was published a couple of years ago, 24, I guess, in December. Um, and I describe it as a book. I received these blessings of brotherhood, forgiveness, and redemption. And I guess what I got out of, and it's all tied in together, Tyler.
Mhm.
It's while I was there, it was the post-war years, and it was obviously that trip that I went back, but I felt that brotherhood, just that amazing brotherhood that was brought back by enemy as well as allies that we fought on the same side,
I mean, you
and
expect it with your allies. You don't expect it with
not
the
at all,
enemy
not at all.
years later.
And it was remarkably, it was the same. It was just this outpouring of love
Mm-hmm.
and um, the North Vietnamese officer, I took along a bunch of challenge coins, Vietnam challenge coins that I gave to special people. And I gave him one, and he was very moved. He held that, he looked at it, and they're heavy, and he disappeared. And he came back and he gave me one of his metal name tags,
Oh, wow.
which is just, I mean, and if you've been in the military, we all probably save our name tags and, they're in a drawer somewhere. And
Mm-hmm.
so I know it was very special to him. And so that sense of brotherhood, the forgiveness that I felt was totally unexpected, very much appreciated uh, by these innocent civilians who were victims of the war. And then the redemption, I came to realize that the decisions about how the war was fought above my pay grade.
Yeah.
Instead,
And it's impersonal.
yes,
It's, at a distance, it's, so it's not the personal animosity that one would expect because it's separate. It's, like I'm doing my job, you're doing your job, and there's a
and that was,
respect on both sides that,
yeah,
yeah, I'm trying to
and
do what
and
I'm told,
and that
especially
was
as a
it,
young man.
and that we did our jobs to the best of our ability and sacrificed a lot and put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, into doing the best job that we can. Why? Because we were supporting these Hmong on the ground who were living in they were operating in dangerous situations. So I felt that redemption. And so that trip was life altering. I'm, I think, kind of become very low key and calm. I'm very content with life. I'm always learning, and I always say, there's so much to learn and experience, and just not enough time. And so my days today are an endless road trip visiting American historical sites. And
It is amazing. I'm thinking back, I'm looking at your experiences. I'm like, okay, 1970-ish, add 25 years, we're talking mid 90s. And then, it's another 20 years. I'm like, so we're about 20 years from when I would be going to Iraq.
yeah,
And, it was 2003, 2004. So I'm 20 years out from that. I'm wondering where it'll be, what the situation would be, and like putting myself in your shoes. And I've talked to a lot of folks about, hey, would you go to Iraq or Afghanistan, wherever you served, would you want to do that? And it's a interesting mix of discussions of beautiful country, kind people, but still a very dangerous place right now.
yeah, yeah.
Or absolutely not, heck with them. It's all over the map. And I think it just hasn't processed to the same degree yet.
Well,
Uh,
there's
to
some
where you can
Vietnam
emotionally
veterans that
mature,
some Vietnam vets, absolutely not. I'd never,
right?
ever going back to that place. And
Hmm.
for me, it was just a wonderful opportunity. And and I mentioned this in the book. We just wanted to come back. We were proud of what we did. We're proud that we, answered our nation's call, that we wore the uniform. We're proud that we did our best to, um, be a patriot, and all we wanted to do was, just come back with our family and friends, reassimilate, get on to our next duty assignment, or get on with our lives.
Hmm.
Um, but they just, didn't let us. But in
Yeah.
hindsight, I look back, I'm a much better person for having done what I did. And we went, and a lot of guys didn't. back in my time.
Hmm.
Um, and I almost feel sorry for them
Yeah.
because they lost, an
It's a
opportunity to.
growth opportunity. Yeah, military service. I was literally having this conversation. Some other guys were talking about, veterans benefits and how things have changed. And
Mhm.
there was some discussion about, oh, they're too generous. That's, whatnot. And the rejoinder to that was, well, the recruiting station was open to everybody.
Yeah.
And that was, because we've had an all volunteer military for many, many years now, but not in your time necessarily. There were some, but a lot of people were drafted. But it's an all volunteer service. And so there's more of a disconnect between the
Yes.
average person who serves and the population as a whole. I mean, if you weren't watching the news, you wouldn't know that we're at war in Iran. I mean, if you turn on the news, sure it's
Yeah.
on there, but it's doesn't, other than gas's price going up, you really wouldn't know it right
Yeah.
now. And so that it's an interesting disconnect between the 1970s, 1960s when they were drafting people, and it was a very forefront of uh, everyone's mind, especially young people, versus now it's really not. Even though we were in Iraq and Afghanistan for 20 plus years, you wouldn't know that we were, in combat every day.
During World War II, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was like 12% of the population served in the military.
Hmm.
Vietnam, it was 7%. Today, it's less than 1%.
Right?
So there really is a disconnect, and it's that just a small minority that we depend upon to fight our nation's wars and defend America in the American way. Um,
Fred, we've talked about a lot of things. Your book is amazing. I appreciate not only the journey of, what you've done, but the growth and the ability to eventually come home well and sort of close that chapter and then share it with a lot of people that are no doubt having the same sort of experiences, the same sort of doubts and frustrations, and going, oh, this
yeah.
can be better. This
And
I can close this chapter, and it's a good thing.
and I commend you, Tyler, and your team of volunteers for what you do, because we know that a lot of veterans never came home.
Hmm.
They couldn't come home. I mean, physically they were home, but emotionally they were scarred. And these young men and women, what they see and experience is just incredibly horrible.
Hmm.
Um, and um, and no one should have to experience it. But yet, they raise their hand, that all volunteer force, and do that. And for you folks to provide them with that support and that help and that assistance and directing them in the right direction to get that help and support that they need is admirable. And I hope that people listening to your podcasts support you and the great work that you do. Um,
We've had a bunch of people. We've talked about writing and journaling and recording. There's a number of programs
yeah.
where people are out there to help you. If you want to record all the things that you've done and all the experiences, or maybe even parts, there's a number of great programs where you can learn how to write it down. Obviously, it's getting
Mhm.
started, but there's also a number of things, including the Library of Congress, that wants to record your stories and make
Yeah.
it part of the official record, your experiences, and add your photos. And you mentioned something earlier, Fred, that I thought was interesting is, oh, it's the same as everybody else. Well, it's like snowflakes, they're all snowflakes, but each one is unique. And my experience and your experience and everyone's experience, we could be in the same job at the same place at the same time, and we're going to have radically different experiences simply because I'm experiencing it in a different way and things are going to be slightly different. And even though so much of the background is the same, it's a whole different lived experience And that's important. And I always say, if you served, you served. It doesn't matter if you were a cook, a bottle washer, a laundry person, a pilot, special forces, SEAL, Delta, guru guy. Everybody served, and each person is essential to getting the mission done. And your experience is of no less or more, no more value than anyone else's. So go get those stories recorded, share them with your families. People will want to know. And Freddie, you've done that. You've done it exceptionally well. I appreciate the fact that you documented all these feelings, but also facts, the whole story, and the arc of redemption in your own experience is really important. Folks, we've been talking with Fred Apgar, and his book is Return to the War on the Plaine de Jar, which is my bad French, and I'll put the link to the book in the show notes so you don't have to try to write it down as you're listening in the car. And Fred, hey, thank you so much for coming on Coming Home Well, but really thank you for everything you've done in documenting and sharing your experiences. Even though it's been a number of years, the story is just as important today as it was when you were serving in 1969 and 1970. It's important and it matters, and people are finding value in it. And I really appreciate everything you've done for yourself, but for every veteran that's going to come across it.
And kudos to you as well, Tyler. Thank you for this invitation. It's been very pleasurable. And congratulations and thanks to your staff and all the volunteers that support our veterans.
So, Fred, I have one last question. Are you planning on writing another book?
Actually, I just had another book published. Yeah.
What is it? And we'll share
on
the
leadership.
link.
It's on leadership. And I wrote it with two other co-authors, and it's titled Leadership Lessons from the Field. And the field is the field of athletics.
Mm-hmm. Which makes sense. Athletic director for many years.
Because, a leader is a leader, be it an athletic team, multinational, whatever it is.
Folks, I didn't know Fred had written another book, and I was just guessing, because once people get that bug, they tend to write more than one. If you've got a favorite author, that's how it happens. And so I was just guessing. Fred, thank you so much for coming on Coming Home Well. We'll put the both books in the show notes so that folks can go check them out. And thank you for everything you're doing. And thank you for joining us on Coming Home Well.
Thank you very much, Tyler. Be blessed.
Thanks for joining us this week on Coming Home Well with Dr. Tyler Pieron. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and a review. Thanks again. And until all are home and all are well, this is Coming Home Well.